Today's News Talk, TNT.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Patrick Henningsen, your host here. Great to have you back with us. We're going to be changing gears a little bit right now, going over to the United Kingdom. We're going to bring on a very special guest who's been on the program before. He is an author and a political commentator. He's done some great work recently, including exposing the sham of the green environmental, green economy, and all the grift and the graft that goes along with that. But Dr. Niall Mccrae on the line right now from the UK. Great to have you with us. I hope you're well.
Very well, thank you, Patrick. Good to be back on again.
So just tell us first of all, I have to ask you the big question: why on earth did Sunak call a snap election? I mean, it just seemed he's at his low point right now in popularity. The Tories are flatlining against an equally weak Labour Party. The whole thing's a disaster. What do you think the motivation was behind this emergency election?
Well, I think there was a danger when Liz Truss became Prime Minister following her election by the Tory members. She won the vote over Rishi Sunak, and she was obviously appealing to some of the kind of populist elements of the Conservative Party, or true conservatives, as you might say. And that wasn't what the establishment wanted. I believe that the sort of upper levels of the establishment wanted to pursue a controlled demolition of the Conservative Party, and Rishi Sunak was the man to do that. And I think that the day that the election was announced, Rishi Sunak came out of Downing Street in the pouring rain. Why did they have to announce the election in the pouring rain? Well, I think that was symbolic. There was Sunak looking like a drowned rat, and it was to kind of symbolize the completion of the demise of the Conservative Party. I mean, electorally, there was no good reason for him to call an election at that time. I mean, the Tories way behind in the opinion polls. And of course, it only gave 5 weeks for the Conservatives and indeed the other parties to fill the candidate lists for seats. And of course, the Conservatives, there's been a great walkout of their sitting MPs. I think between 100 and 200 of them are not sitting again. And some of those, they didn't have candidates for many of those seats. So it was not practically the right thing to do for Sunak to call for an election. But I believe that it was probably something that the British establishment was required or wanted to do, because the US election, of course, is coming up in November, and it was to get this out of the way. But there's also, and this is relevant to what you were talking about earlier in your show, Patrick, there's also a big question here about the timing with the war against Russia.
Okay, well, let's hold that thought. I want to get back to that because that's very important. But what about this as well as a threat? I do see that kind of controlled demolition of the Tory party, and at some point the establishment needs to ditch a vehicle that's stalling and then fit up a new vehicle to run the agenda. And it looks like they have Trilateral Commission member Keir Starmer, an arch globalist, an adherent to the World Economic Forum. So all of the bad policies, all of the destructive policies, all the things that will undermine society, tradition, civilization, he will be very happy to ram through at record speed, much like Tony Blair did with the emergence of New Labour in 1997. So I do see that happening. But there's another sort of obstacle there, and that is, and you can tell me if this is legitimate or not, but the Reform Party is really surging. So if they had enough time, let's just say the general election was like beginning in November, okay, that would give the Reform Party enough time, possibly, to really make a gigantic dent in the Conservative Party, to basically breach the red wall and all of these things, maybe that even the Brexit Party could not achieve because it was a one-issue party. The Reform Party has got a much wider breadth of appeal and issues whereby they could be pulling Labour voters, they can pull Conservative voters, they can pull all the Brexiteers, the UKIP remnants. So by doing a emergency election, they kind of cut the Reform Party out at the knees, possibly. Do you think that had anything to do with it?
Well, I think that there is one very good reason that no one seems to be talking about for why Nigel Farage has suddenly entered the election. He basically pinched a Reform candidate's place in Clacton in Essex, which is where Douglas Carswell won the first seat for UKIP. It's a very traditional area of Britain, or traditional working class, lower middle class voters, elderly. If Reform are going to win anywhere, it would be in Clacton. So Farage took the candidacy away from someone who had been reported for, making some comments about Muslims and the Zionist New World Order. So Farage has come in. Now, I believe that the establishment, and I'm talking sort of real upstairs near the top of the establishment, the people who are really making the decisions, they wanted Reform and Nigel Farage. They wanted Farage to step in, because the danger is, Patrick, that this election was creating so little interest in the British public, where there's such distrust and apathy and anger and dismay about all the mainstream political parties, more and more people waking up to the fact that it's just one party, really. It's a uni party carrying out global orders. And so that we were facing the prospect of the lowest turnout in a general election ever. And I think that Farage coming in, and you can see the effect, Patrick. He's lit a fuse. Suddenly, everyone is talking about the election, and I think that Farage, although he creates lots of publicity and lots of excitement, I think the establishment knows that there's very little prospect of Reform winning many seats. They'll almost certainly win Clacton because Farage is such a charismatic showman. But I can't see Reform at the moment, unless they really somehow gain a momentum. I don't think they're going to win many seats. And of course, as you've hinted at, they are much more of a threat to the Conservatives than they are to Labour. It's already been decided. It was decided long ago that Sir Keir Starmer would become the Prime Minister of Britain, I believe. I don't think Reform and Nigel Farage are going to stop that from happening. But what they will do is create a lot more buzz about the election and give it perhaps more sense of legitimacy, because perhaps more people will vote than would have done otherwise.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's I think really well put, Neil. That it'd be like, well, that election, that was a non-election, but now it's something because of the excitement that Farage has injected there with Reform. I do agree. Although Reform advocates will say, no, we're not going to split the Tory vote, and this is obviously a big concern. But in reality, they kind of are. I mean, because let's be honest, that's really the majority of people they're drawing out there. So the interesting phenomenon, however, which I think could be interesting, the Workers' Party of Britain does have momentum, and we'll see. I don't know how Chris Williamson will fare in Derby. I know how difficult it is with the two-party lock on a lot of the constituencies around the country. But when you have Craig Murray You have people like Chris Williamson. I mean, even the possibility that you could have great minds, foreign policy minds, truly people who are versed in international relations, along with George Galloway, in the House of Commons. That will definitely, I think, influence conversations, the debate, the press coverage, but also public opinion, because all those clips go viral, basically. So that's kind of a very disruptive force, isn't it? There on the left side of the paradigm. Your thoughts on the emergence of the Workers' Party of Britain in the last 6 months?
Well, George Galloway got a stupendous result in that by-election in Rochdale, but he was only able to sit as an MP for 54 days before Sunak called this early election. And even George Galloway, even a name as big as him, and even with all that's going on in Gaza and the outrage of the Muslim communities in Britain, I think even George Galloway will struggle to retain his seat. I mean, I personally hope he does retain it. And I also hope that some of the others like Chris Williamson and Craig Murray, who's standing in Blackburn, win as well. I think that's less likely. George Galloway may scrape through. It won't be as emphatic a win as the first time, because the problem is, Patrick, and I'm sure your viewers will appreciate this in the US as well, is that in Britain it's a two-party system, and what the Tories always do is they say, okay, things haven't been quite as good as you want, but they'll be a lot worse under Labour. And of course, Labour do the same after they've been in government. So it's that's how it works. People vote negatively. They vote to keep the other party out. And for that reason, they tend to not take the risk of voting for an independent. But having said that, Patrick, I would say that there are some independents this time with a bigger chance of winning. I mean, we've mentioned Farage, he's obviously with the Reform Party. We've also got Andrew Bridgen, the COVID critic, ejected from the Conservative Party, but very popular in his constituency in Leicestershire. George Galloway, we've mentioned, and Jeremy Corbyn, of course, in Islington in London. So, and there may be others too, but I think the writing is on the wall for a very large Labour majority in this election.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what the polling's saying. There's not much to choose from between the Tories and Labour at the moment. But so this is basically this is going to be a referendum to really show what mandate Rishi Sunak had, if any, or didn't have. That result is going to be there on record, because he didn't have to run before. He wasn't even elected by his own party members. But, Liz Truss didn't face a general, but at least they had a conservative membership vote that gave her some kind of a mandate within the party. Rishi Sunak was basically appointed by, but that's a good question, appointed by who?
Well, it depends how much you want to go into conspiracy theories on that, Patrick. I mean, the official narrative is that Liz Truss presented this god-awful budget and therefore had to be kicked out before she destroyed the economy. That's the official story. I think the real story is that the Conservative membership chose the wrong leader, and she was making the wrong noises. And so she was replaced by someone who would carry out the program, which was about turning the Conservative Party into one of the most successful political party in British history, into something probably not quite as bad as what happened to the Conservative Party in Canada, which was reduced, I think, to 2 seats. It won't get quite as bad as that, but they're more or less destroyed after this election, I think.
Yeah, and there was another good independent candidate who was standing in Bethnal Green and Stepney, Mohammed Okunji, who's a human rights lawyer, incredible political orator and commentator, who's been very outspoken on the situation in Gaza. obviously against the Israelis and the Israeli lobby, but he is a step down this week because there's too many people, too many chefs in the kitchen, doesn't want to split the vote, and wants to basically oust the incumbent there, who I believe is Labor, but has been supporting the genocide in Gaza. But he's unfortunately stepped down. So here's a situation, Rishi Sunak. We've got a video here. I'll get your reaction to this. Sunak out on the campaign trail, getting real with the people of Britain. Here's what happened.
Idea. Really lovely idea, and it was great. I'm glad we did it. So, right, do you want to vote? Yeah,
I was just going to ask, why do you hate young people so much? You're making us go to the army. You're making us.
No, you'll have a choice. You'll have a choice.
I've volunteered all my life, and
then you will love it. You will love it.
Why do I have to do it again when I'm finally coming out of education? And then
because I think a culture of service. I wouldn't do it like that. A culture of service is a good thing for our country. And you'll have a choice.
You're welcome.
Wow, Neil. Wow. All I can say is wow. He didn't deny there's going to be mandatory conscription. He basically said you should do it, you'll enjoy it, and you're not going to have a choice. Did I hear that right? Did you hear what I heard, Neil?
Well, I think it's been decided. I think that was one of Sunak's last jobs. In the completion of the transfer of power was to get the conscription idea into public discourse. Everyone is talking about it now, and of course they'll need conscription if they're going to have this war with Russia.
And so that's another thing people are maybe suspecting, is that this general election was to preempt a bigger announcement, which is coming, which is that the Britain is going to declare officially war on Russia, and then the United States presumably is going to pile in behind them, or they'll go in together. But this is on the cards. Is this the type of thing that you can see happening this summer, or is this something that's going to be strung out over to past the U.S. election in November? What do you think?
Yes, I think the latter, Patrick. Back at New Year's Eve, I was on a show, and I was going against what almost all the other guests were saying in their predictions for 2024. They were all saying that this is going to be a dramatic year, big things are going to happen. And I said, no, I don't think so, because this is a year of consolidation. This is a year when there's important elections in the US and the UK and other countries. And nothing really major will happen until Trump is positioned back in the White House. So after he's inaugurated, and it's quite obvious that the establishment is setting up Trump for the White House, despite all this theater about the court cases. What will happen, I think, after the British election will kind of corroborate what Andrew Bridgen, the maverick, now independent MP, said in an interview with Ahmed Malik about a week before Sunak announced the general election. Andrew Bridgen said that Britain is already effectively at war with Russia, but the people haven't been told that yet. But they will be told in July or August. And then just a week later, Sunak announces the 4th July election. Bridgen had also said that Sunak doesn't want to be a war prime minister. So Starmer's going to be in July in Downing Street. I don't think that there will be a very sort of dramatic declaration of war like we had in 1939. I don't think it will be like that, but I think it will be British troops on the ground in Ukraine. It will be a big step up, and Starmer will be, his government will be certainly drumming for war, for escalation, and this will continue, but nothing too much will happen until early next year, once Trump is back in the White House.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying could possibly be derailed if, for instance, something happens in the United States politically. In other words, I think there is a potential, and again, this would probably trigger a massive effort to either unseat Donald Trump or who knows, make sure he doesn't get in the White House, which is he just came out in the last 48 hours and said the real danger in the world right now isn't climate change or anything else. It's the threat of a nuclear war. We need to de-escalate with Russia. This is insane. Biden's going to bring us down the road to World War III. This needs to be capped, basically. That's what he said in the last 48 hours. Now, that surprised a lot of us because Biden's obviously not saying that. He's busy saying last week, leaked to Politico, you saw that. He said, oh, he secretly gave the green light to Zelensky to use U.S. weapons deep inside Russia. Lo and behold, Neil, we find out not only are they doing that, they targeted a Russian early warning nuclear radar station 1,000 miles inside Russia with drones. It's confirmed. So that's those types of moves. I mean, Ukraine itself could completely derail this agenda by doing stupid things on their end. They're getting more desperate. They know that they could actually be potentially thrown under the bus by a Trump administration in the new year. So what I'm saying, Neil, is do you think there's a chance somehow? I do think this is definitely on the agenda for Britain, but is there a chance that some kind of change in the political outlook in America could somehow prevent this escalation that you're talking about, which, let's face it, this is the road to World War III. Could this be somehow headed off at the pass?
Oh, well, I would make 2 points in response there, Patrick. Firstly, I think Zelensky is mainly doing what he's told. I mean, there may be some little bit of flexibility that he's got, but he's following orders. I mean, he's not paying for this war. It's the West, it's NATO. Now, the other point is about Trump sounding like he wants to prevent any escalation with Russia. And that would be in keeping with his first term as president, where I think he was the first president for a long time not to start any new war. I think that'll be different in his new term, presuming that he gets in the election in November. I think that a lot of noises are being made at the moment that are giving the sense that America and the West doesn't want war. So you've even got the Democrat, who's at Kirby, is it, saying something along those lines. The defense spokesman, whatever he's called, of the Biden administration, and Trump making those noises recently. I think that's all to kind of give the impression that this is not something that the West wants. The West wants peace, but actually everything they're doing behind that rhetoric is preparing for this great military conflict, which is looks like is going to be unleashed in the very near future. And I don't think it's too much, Patrick. Now, there's a lot of hubris you'll get about World War III, but I think, we really are looking at that as a serious threat.
Yeah, and I don't think it's hyperbolic at all. I think this has to be taken seriously. We're taking it very seriously, and especially this week, devoting some time to this. We're talking about the UK snap general election. It does look like there's going to be a changing of the guard from the Conservative Tory party. Rishi Sunak, the appointed PM, not very popular. He may be working on borrowed time now, only a couple of weeks left before election day. And it looks like everybody's the polls are pointing to Keir Starmer and Labour taking over the reins of power in Britain. And with that, probably pushing a whole range of other agendas that the Tories aren't pushing. So there is contrast here from the establishment point of view, Neil, we'll bring this graphic up on screen here. Of course, Labor would want to push the green agenda. They'd want to kind of reboot the WEF agenda, the technocracy agenda, all of the various globalist policies. So we'll bring that graphic up on screen here. This article recently from the Telegraph earlier in the year, but it kind of was telegraphing, no pun intended, what's coming in the coming months. And so the title of this article is Why Keir Starmer's Plan to Rewire Britain is Already Coming Unstuck. Labour's goal to create a clean energy superpower borders on the fanciful. But this is the thing. The green agenda is being ditched in so many different ways. People are really skeptical about the EV revolution. They've pretty much thrown in the towel. Britain's not going to convert its automotive fleet to green cars. They don't have the electrical capability to do this, the power stations required, and so forth. So they've done this kind of half-cocked agenda. They've rolled it out. The thing's stalling. Skeptics are popping up all over the place. Mainstream skepticism of green policies is now becoming commonplace. So you're not being derided as a conspiracy theorist for challenging the climate narrative now. So this is something that has come during this Tory time in power, and they need to wrestle control of this again because it's in danger of being permanently shelved. All of these fanciful, crazy climate policies that were all accepted as gospel just a few years ago, Neil. So your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that the climate change agenda and the net zero policies will continue whether people are talking about them or not. And judging by the way the sort of globalist technocrats have been operating for many decades, they'd rather we weren't talking about it. They'd rather we didn't have an election campaign where the harsh realities of net zero policies were being too openly discussed. They would actually rather we talk about immigration. They would rather we talked about other things. And it's interesting how Nigel Farage introduced a phrase to the election campaign yesterday of net zero immigration. And I think that's interesting because there hasn't been much talk by the mainstream parties. I mean, sure, you had that announcement by Keir Starmer. They've got to do a bit of it. They can't, pretend that they're not going to be doing any of these radical interventions before the election and then surprise people afterwards. So they have to do some talking about it. But as you say, Patrick, more and more people are waking up to the fact that green is just a cloak for authoritarianism, for creating a two-tier society under this technocratic Great Reset agenda. This is all about total control of population and resources. It's got nothing to do with science. It's got nothing to do with nature, and it's got nothing to do with ethics. This is a very dystopian program. And of course, Keir Starmer is very much signed up to it. And we must remember that Britain had the most advanced climate change law back in 2008, when it went well ahead of any other country in the world with its the Climate Change Act, and that was the work of the Miliband brothers, Ed and David, who were respectively ministers of the Department of the Environment, later renamed Department of Climate Change, and now the Department of Net Zero or something like that. And working very much with George Soros, I believe, behind the scenes. And interestingly, Patrick, an aide to Ed Miliband was Polly Billington. Now, you may not have heard of Polly Billington, but she features in my book, Green and Tooth and Claw. She is the head of an organization called UK 100, which is about getting local governments to go much further than national governments in imposing the net zero agenda. She is standing in a seat in Kent, which she's very likely to win because the Tories are well down in the opinion polls. And she is set to become Sir Keir Starmer's minister for climate change and net zero.
I think if you've got a copy of your book with you, if you kindly
yes.
show that to our audience.
Yes, I do. Yeah, this is my book, folks. It's called Green in Tooth and Claw: The Misanthropic Mission of Climate Alarm. It's available on Amazon, where it's doing pretty well. And what my book does is it doesn't go into the science. I think there's definitely a need for books that refute the scientific or the pseudo-scientific assertions about climate change. My book doesn't go into that because my belief is that this really isn't about science at all. This is a long-term project to create a global technocracy and a neo-feudalist two-tier society with the masses lorded over by an elite, and the masses will be very much restricted with their movements, while the elite will be able to live lives of luxury and fly around in their private jets.
Yeah, that's highly recommended. I was lucky enough to get an early access to your manuscript there to read that book. It is an excellent read, and I do like your book because it doesn't get hung up on a lot of the numbers and the scientific debate. You're looking at the more broader agenda and on all the political engineering that's going on to get these policies into place. Really, what it comes down to, Neil, is money. At the end of the day, I mean, if Labor comes up with this grand plan to reboot I think their green prosperity plan, and they're going to be touting green jobs, so we know the drill. But this is going to cost money, and it's saying it's going to be $30 billion a year. That's what they'll need to borrow to basically implement this, quote, green prosperity plan in the run up to the magic year. The apocalypse year is 2030. This is when everyone's supposed to meet all their targets. Otherwise, the world's going to end, according to the zealots on this. But Starmer's getting a tremendous pushback, even from his front bench on this, and also the energy executives who are expected to implement this. Because at the end of the day, Neil, maybe you can talk to this, these policies don't actually make real sense in the real world economy. And they don't make business sense. They're creating a lot of disruption. We're seeing this in the current energy market now. There's a lot of disruption and a lot of interfering in real price discovery in the markets in so many cases. But at the same time, the government's trying to control who and where we buy our energy from. And definitely Russia is now prohibited from supplying any energy to Europe or the UK. And what does this mean for the cost of heating one's home in Britain? Has it gone down? Has it gone up? Well, it's kind of gone up in an incredible way. So what's your forecast for the green agenda hitting the economic wall of reality?
Well, we have got plenty of energy in the UK. Now, the Industrial Revolution was fired by coal. And then the American century was largely fired by oil. And Britain had the fortune to find oil in the North Sea and started drilling in the 1970s. So we wouldn't have enough to be self-sufficient on oil, but there's a lot of it out there under the seabed in the North Sea. I mean, they have not tapped half of what's there. But of course, Keir Starmer's policies and that of the Scottish National Party are to stop drilling And I happened to be in a hotel bar the other day and had the misfortune to have, they had the Scottish National Party conference on live. I think it was on Sky with their new leader. I can't remember his name, Swinney. And Swinney was bragging about how Scotland is going to be a net zero economy, far in advance of the rest of the UK. And he was telling the delegates that there will be no more drilling in the North Sea. But that's also Labour Party policy. And another thing that the SNP did in Scotland was they shut down the largest fuel refinery in Europe, Grangemouth. That's gone. Just as one of the largest steel mills in Europe at Port Talbot in Wales was closed, again, for these net zero policies. So the reality is, Patrick, they know that this is going to cause tremendous hardship. They know that this is going to cause increases in bills. They don't want people using so much energy, and they'll do everything they can to stop that. And I believe that the pushback against Keir Starmer, just as there's been pushback against the Tories pushing climate change policies and local councils pushing climate change policies, they don't seem to care that there's that pushback, because these things are decided at a global level. It doesn't matter if there's anger. I mean, you remember Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum predicting, or almost as if he knew well in advance that there was going to be civil unrest about the policies of the Great Reset. They've prepared for them. They've written this in to the program. They're expecting it. And so it doesn't really seem to matter if people do a bit of protesting here and there. There's got to be some serious resistance if we're to stop what they're doing.
Yeah, there's got to be some actions. I mean, look at the first term of Donald Trump. He defunded the WHO. That was one of the things he did straight off the bat. That shocked a lot of people. I was surprised. So he defunded the WHO. He pretty much shut down the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. And that's been a real conduit for these types of sustainable development policies and green policies in America. So those are the sort of drastic actions that would kind of derail some of these types of globalist agendas. But then he's out of power. Immediately they reinstitute funding for those things, and everything's up and running pretty much as it was. But still, it just hasn't come through and hasn't delivered on its promise, not even close. And the sums continue to not add up. And so they have to double down. Every summer, Neil, it's coming soon. You'll get the global warming heat wave fear stories in the tabloids. It'll happen every August. We get what you normally in the summer, you get a week of hot weather, and they're going crazy in the UK. This is, proof that, we need to stop climate change, basically. And then as soon as the weather tails off and you get into the fall, that's the last you see of those stories. So it's just kind of become a type of a seasonal routine now, but it's just getting less and less traction. I really think they're hitting a major crisis point on this. It's just, it's not at a time when the global economy is massive contractions, a war with Russia, if we get any kind of a major world war type situation, that's going to make prices of fuel, I think, skyrocket. The closing of the Straits of Hormuz. So I don't know. I think it's a harder and harder sell going forward, and it's going to be a real tough point. I don't know how they're going to be able to sell it. Your final thoughts on this?
Well, I'll save my most controversial comments to the end, Patrick, if I may, and that is to say that I believe we're in a situation similar to 1914. Back then, there was the rise of eugenics, and I explain about this in my book, that following Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, you had this tremendous sort of growth of the eugenics movement, which took the upper classes by storm. All the academics and people in all the professions were all into eugenics. This idea that there were too many people and it was the wrong quality of people. And this led to the First World War, which was absolute carnage, a massive cull of the working class population of Britain and Germany and France and so on. And I believe that we're heading towards another major population cull through a third world war. I think that if going back to Klaus Schwab's comments about how there's the potential for civil unrest, one of the best ways to stop civil unrest is to cull the young, fit male population. And that's what the upper classes did with the First World War, when it looked serious that there was going to be this labor movement was gaining momentum. There was the real chance of revolt against the rulers. And I think that we're approaching a similar situation now. If there is war with Russia, a major world war, then clearly with the weaponry that exists today, there's going to be a human calamity.
Well, certainly, if that pattern holds, that would be terrible. But this is exactly what happened after the Second World War. But we had a baby boom after the Second World War, but the policies seem to be in place already to prevent that from happening if there is a third world war, not to mention the environmental devastation, the potential for nuclear fallout. All of these things need to be factored in. The globalists are making their plans, Neil. They have their bunkers ready. They think they can weather it out wherever they are, in Paraguay or in the United States or wherever. And everyone else will be left holding the can with whatever time they have left to sort out a decent place to live and to get on with the world. So I think it's an important point. I think we need to put that into the discussion, Neil. I'm glad you brought it up. I don't think it's hyperbolic or extreme. Certainly, we have some crazy, we can all agree, we have some psychopaths in positions of decision-making and power at the moment. So that just stands to reason that they have a certain extreme ideological beliefs that most people don't share, but they share. As you said, eugenics, perfect example of this. So anyway, it's worth talking about and I think raising the discussion, raising the alarm even on that. Dr. Niall Mccrae, thank you so much for joining us as well. He is the author of Green in Tooth and Claw. Go check that out on Amazon. Flash that book up on screen, please, Neil, again, so people can see what that looks like. Excellent read. Put that on your list. We'll drop a link in the TNT chat community for that book as well. And a big thank you to Dr. Frank Romano in the first hour. And a big thank you, of course, to you, our listeners and our viewers here at TNT, Today's News Talk. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen, signing out. We'll see you same time, same place tomorrow. All the best.